Operation Paperclip, one of the most controversial U.S. programs in history. After World War II, America secretly brought over 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and doctors to work for the U.S. government. First, one of the most famous recruits, Wernher von Braun, the mastermind behind NASA's Saturn V rocket. Yep, the guy who helped put Americans on the moon first built rockets for Hitler. Second, many of these scientists had direct ties to war crimes, but the U.S. scrubbed their records to make them hireable. Some were even given new identities.
Operation Paperclip.
Kommen Sie sofort Alabama Wetter. Come try the BBQ. Come see life free from the guilt.
Come, see all our new white friends.
Come to Huntsville, Alabama, home of the Space and Rocket Center. Staffed by Nazi scientists smuggled here by your government. Oh yeah, it really happened. Huntsville, Alabama. It's some fucked up shit. But hey, we got to the moon.
So, your history teacher never taught you about Operation Paperclip, but that's okay, because Valenti Videos is going to tell you all about it real quickly. You see, right after World War II, there was a little thing called the Nuremberg trials, where a whole lot of these Germans were going to answer for their crimes. However, before it started, the United States began Operation Paperclip, where we started to take a whole bunch of these German scientists and bring them over to the United States so that they didn't have to answer for their crimes. You see, the Russians started scooping up a whole bunch of them right after the war ended, and then we decided, you know what, we ought to do the same thing, considering we're about to enter a new age where we're competing against the Soviet Union for global supremacy. So we scoop up a whole bunch of these German scientists. One of them is Wernher von Braun, who was the head of NASA. He was also a real rat bastard. You can look up the shit that he did. However, we smuggled all these German scientists into the United States, but they needed new names. They needed new records. We had to relocate them to the South so that they could make good friends. And, the only thing that was supposed to be left over from their old paperwork with their real names and their real history was the paperclip mark, the little imprint that the paperclip would leave behind when you put the new file on top of the old file, hence the name Operation Paperclip.
73 is pretty much the high point of the American empire.
Hi folks, I really appreciate Dr. Roy Casagrande and what he does. He teaches political science at Austin Community College. I think that's where he still is, and I really wish that he was on TikTok. But what this illustrates is a really important point about why historians are needed to provide some context for a couple of these issues. And this is a really important issue when we're talking about American exceptionalism, when we're talking about these kind of blinders that people put on when they look back at American accomplishments and American achievements. We can see that happening in this video. And this is not to criticize Dr. Casagrande. This is really just to go ahead and make sure that we're providing some added layer of context to this because it matters. His main point is really about the scientific achievements that we haven't accomplished anything like we accomplished with going to the moon. And that the core part of going to the moon is the Saturn V rocket. This is what he says. And that it's American achievement that does that. The problem is that that's not what happens. And if we're going to have an honest 250th, we need to be honest about it all. I'm not saying he's being dishonest. I'm just saying he's being incomplete. That we need to sort of add on to it that it's not Americans. Just like it's not the French the Americans who win the American Revolution, it's the French. It's not the Americans who get us to the moon. It's the Nazis. And this is a part of history that a lot of people don't talk about, but we need to talk more about. There are a couple of small documentaries, small pieces about it, but why this has not been a part of anything broader, I don't get. You can watch Apollo 13 all you want, but at the very end of celebrating the space race, we have to understand that this is the product of Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was the decision by the United States government to rescue as many Nazi scientists as possible at the end of the European phase of World War II, to make sure that they are not falling into Soviet hands and that they were able to assist American growth during the Cold War. Take a look at Operation Paperclip. Take a look at the almost 2,000 scientists, between 1,000 and 2,000 Nazi scientists they bring over. We're not just talking about scientists who end up working for the Nazis. We're talking about people from Wernher von Braun on down who are members of the SS, who are directly complicit in concentration camp atrocities, in working concentration camp prisoners to death in order to achieve their goals for the Nazi rocket program. The United States doesn't achieve anything with their rocket program. They don't achieve anything in terms of the science that's required to provide for the healthcare of getting men to the moon. Science health becomes a whole new thing. Why? Because of all of the Nazi scientists brought over. And so we're not just talking about people who happen to be Germans and they wanted to go ahead and continue their work, so they ended up working for the Nazis. We're talking card-carrying members, full-on board members of the Nazi Party, who were part of the SS, who were part of the party, who were signed on to the Nazi project, who happened to benefit from the fact that the Americans wanted them to go ahead and jumpstart the American rocket program, which turned into the American space program. And it's not just the guys at the top like von Braun. It is more than 1,000 scientists, between 1,000 and 2,000 scientists. Were a couple of them identified by the Department of Justice as being war criminals? Yeah, but long after they retired from active service at NASA and in other parts of the U.S. government. Long after. And we're talking about a handful of them who were kicked out of the United States, sent back to Germany, long after that their active use to the United States space, rocket and space program. So whenever we think about celebrating us getting to the moon as being part of a great American achievement, we have to, again, engage in some honest history here and know that America never would have done that if there wasn't a swastika behind that effort.
Look at it this way. You can't have a war called the War Against Evil, that's the other name for WW2, and then keep some of that evil after you win. That means evil won. Do you understand that? Like, that's a trope in a lot of media where, like, they vanquish the big bad foe, and then right before the credits cut, a little bit of that foe slinks off, and then, of course, lo and behold, it comes back even stronger. And as far as discoveries go, the math ain't changing. That'll be discovered in 10, 20 years tops. I would much rather have to wait a couple decades to, get the math back, as long as it means I don't have evil demons literally in the government and propagating. But if we didn't have that science, we wouldn't have been able to overtake Russia in the space race. Because communism's the big bad evil guy, even though they probably did more than America did in the war to win, but that's a whole other story. And at the end of the day, the bad guys from World War II made all their shit after, like, us. They did the big laurels and eagles and fucking Jim Crow-like laws. Like, come on, dude. Why do you think America had that thing at Madison Square Garden where they, let them do their thing? And then why did America stay out of it for so long?
Communication with each other
and they
somehow.
communicate.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, I wrote a book about Operation Paperclip, and my God, talk about a rabbit's hole.
That's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole.
Let's explain to people that don't know what we're talking about. Operation Paperclip was when, after World War II, the United States gathered up a ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Wernher von Braun. They had Wernher von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good friends with Hitler type Nazi.
Yes, he ran a Berlin rocket factory where they hung the 5 slowest Jews. They would hang them out front so everybody would know, like, this is what happens when you work slow. We'll hang you. I mean, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said that if Wernher von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity.
Yes, they would.
And that was the head of NASA. That was the head of NASA. That was the guy who got us to the moon. That was the big cheese guy. Yeah. So we were willing to put a lot of really dark things aside in order to gather up the best scientists so that the Soviet Union couldn't get them all. And they got a few of them as well. But we got how many? More than 1,000, right?
Allegedly 1,400, but I would not be surprised if, the story changes and there were more, right?
Yeah.
But that goes back to our discussion earlier about being in pole position. I mean, that's why we grabbed those Nazis. We were like, if we don't get them, the Russians will.
I get it. And, and I'm sure the Nazis could say, I didn't want to do it. They made me. I'm a nice person. I love Jews.
Well, that was part of the mythology. It was like, we got the good Germans. Well, no, we didn't.
Right.
We got the top Germans, and who do you think the top Germans were?
Yeah.
They were coveted by Hitler, Himmler, Goring,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were right. I mean, there were guys that we grabbed out of the docks at Nuremberg literally to come be part of our program,
One of these guys, you're smart, you're an asset, right? I mean, that's what Genghis Khan used to do. He'd take warlords from the other side and capture them and go, listen, just come over here, bro. Come on, work for me. I'm the man.
I mean, ideology aside, I'm super smart and I want that to be known. That's kind of that's the competitor, right?
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
you cannot be the best rocket designer in the world and not want those talents demonstrated. That's Wernher von Braun's story. That's the story of all of them. And that was so shocking writing that book, because it's like, wow, huge amounts of talent, but how far will the competitor go to see their baby come to fruition? What are they willing to put aside?
Yeah.
They didn't bring us here to change the past.
Say that again.
They didn't bring us here to change the past.
They didn't bring us here at all.
What if I told you everything Elon's doing was in a book? A book written by a German brought over after World War II in Operation Paperclip. Wernher von Braun in 1948 wrote a book called Project Mars. It was released in 1953. But basically, war breaks out on planet Earth and it becomes necessary to travel to Mars. And can you guess who they meet on Mars? The Elon. The Elon and his cabinet of 10 men run Mars and the Martian government. And of course, the Elon teaches the Earthlings his views on ethics, morality. Of course, they live underground. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that's where Elon and the Boring Company comes about. It's maddening to think this is what's shaping our world right now. That an apartheid South African emerald mine owner could name his son after somebody in a schmatzy book. And now that dude's just the richest man on earth, infecting every form of politics. But did you ever have a doubt he was named after?
You do eventually colonize Mars. What are you planning on doing to make it habitable?
Well, at first, you would have to have a life support system, because Mars has a low-density atmosphere, only about 1% the density of Earth, and it's primarily CO2. Over time, you can terraform Mars. Terraform means make it like Earth, essentially. If you warm Mars up, you will, there's a bunch of frozen CO2 that will evaporate, densify the atmosphere, and you'd actually want kind of global warming on Mars. It appears highly likely that Mars had liquid oceans, albeit a long time ago. Mars is covered in ice. And now the ice is then covered in dust for the mostly, except at the poles. So there's a lot of ice. In fact, I believe if Mars was warmed up, you'd have an ocean about a mile deep on 40% of the planet.
I think we could have 1 million people on Mars in 20 years.
Yes.
And what's the technology we're missing right now? When you think about 1 million people on Mars, do we have the ability to get water, to get food, to keep them safe? I mean, what do we need to make that happen?
Well, you need to recreate the entire base of industry of Earth. So, we're here at the top of a massive pyramid of industry that starts with mining a vast array of materials, those materials going through hundreds of steps of refinement. We grow food, obviously. We grow trees. We make things out of the trees. You've got to build all that on Mars. And Mars is a hostile environment. It's You know, it sometimes gets above zero on a warm summer day near the equator on Mars. Really, it's quite cold.
And how do you prep for that?
Well, in the beginning on Mars, you have to have a life support habitation module.
Right.
Like you can't just live outdoors. You can't breathe the air.
Like a dome, you think is likely?
Yeah. Glass dome.
Turns out tonight Elon Musk blew something up and disrupted the lives of thousands of Americans. For the second time in less than 2 months, a rocket launched by Elon Musk's company SpaceX exploded and rained potentially dangerous debris down over a wide area of Earth, causing real chaos for planes and airline passengers. This was the most recent test of SpaceX's Starship rocket. Musk says he wants to use Starship to one day take people to Mars. This one lifted off around 6:30 p.m. Eastern from the southern tip of Texas. In a statement, SpaceX said that, quote, during Starship's ascent burn, the vehicle experienced a rapid unscheduled disassembly. Rapid unscheduled disassembly is kind of Elon Musk's specialty these days, especially in a way that really messes with other people through no fault of their own. As debris rained down tonight from Elon Musk's failed rocket, multiple airports in Florida, including Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach and Orlando, were all brought to a complete halt, ground stop at all of those airports. Even departures as far north as the Philadelphia airport were significantly delayed. Now, as I mentioned, this is the second time this has happened in recent weeks. SpaceX's last test of the Starship rocket suffered a similar fate in mid-January. When that happened, the FAA grounded Starship and has since been overseeing SpaceX's investigation of what went wrong. Even though that investigation is still underway, last week, the FAA nevertheless cleared SpaceX to launch another one, even though the investigation into why the last one blew up wasn't complete. Why'd they clear it? I don't know. But of course, in between those two flights, Donald Trump was sworn in as president. He installed Elon Musk, his top campaign donor, as kind of his co-president. Musk's Doge austerity operation fired hundreds of people at the FAA. And the FAA reportedly decided to suddenly start using Starlink satellite terminals made by Musk's company.
But the cars themselves, so what is this one, Elon?
That's a Model Y.
That's a Model Y, so I have a lot of information to put into price.
Yeah.
I want to make a good deal here. You know, I do notice this. They have one, which is $35,000, which is pretty low. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's, I guess we want to make the point that Teslas aren't all expensive. You can get a Tesla for as little as $35,000. Yeah. And I just want to thank the president for his support. This means a lot.
Her parents, by the way, were very fanatical in favor of apartheid. This is quite interesting. Her parents came to South Africa from Canada because they sympathized with the Afrikaner government. They used to support Hitler and all that sort of stuff. But they didn't know, obviously, I don't think they knew what the Nazis were doing. But they in Canada, they were in the German party in Canada. And they sympathized with the Germans.
Yeah.
So when the Afrikaners government came into power here in 1948, then May's father, who was quite an interesting guy, he was a very good pilot, he said he wants to be with the Afrikaners because he agrees with apartheid, you see.
The founder of NASA, which is this deceptive organization that collects billions of dollars from taxpayers every year, was a man by the name of Wernher von Braun. Now, this Wernher von Braun, he was a German. He was a German engineer who played a prominent role in all aspects of rocketry and space exploration, first in Germany and after World War II in the United States. So it's funny because these engineers came from Germany after World War II and they came to and received prominent positions in the U.S. government.
Prominent positions.
Now, when Wernher von Braun died, his tombstone, or the place where they buried him, has a scripture, and that scripture is Psalms chapter 19 from verse 1. And you know what it says? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. So this guy who's supposedly the head of NASA's space exploration, he knew that the Earth is covered with a firmament that is furrowed. They're deceiving masses.
See how fast it goes? Just like, let's go, oh man. It's good, it's good. Let's go. No way.
Where's he coming back to land here?
When Wernher von Braun was dying of cancer, he asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak. And I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons in space, why they're a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea, and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the approximately 4 years that I had the opportunity of working with him, and that was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on a weapons system. And that was how we identify an enemy. The enemy, at first he said, the enemy against whom we're going to build a space-based weapon system that he thought was a ridiculous idea, unnecessary and very dangerous, not to mention too costly, etc. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. So when I hear that there's a possible threat of extraterrestrials, and I look at the history of thousands of years of possible visitations, recorded history, and when I hear now the stories of the disclosures of honest military intelligence industry people who have had experiences with UFOs, with crashes and landings, with live or dead bodies of extraterrestrial beings, people from out in the universes. And if I'm ever told that these are enemies against whom we have to build space-based weapon systems, based on my own personal experience of having worked in the military-industrial complex on weapon systems and military strategy, I'm going to know it's a lie. It's a lie. And I'm not only not going to believe it, but I'm going to go out as loudly as I can and tell everyone to take a look. They have not taken us away yet. We're still here after thousands of years of visits. If in fact they're still visiting us now and people are working with ETs, live or dead, if they're taking photographs, if they're experiencing all kinds of UFO experiences, then we have to look at this as something that is not a hostile occurrence. It would be my guess, based on my own experience of having traveled to countries whom we've been told had hostile intentions against the United States, it would be my hope and my intention to do everything I could to work with people who are working to communicate with and cooperate with these extraterrestrial beings, because they're clearly not hostile.
The highlights from NASA's press conference regarding UFOs. No matter what your feelings are on this topic, this is a major moment in our history where our government and NASA, for the first time ever, are acknowledging UFOs, UAPs, with a serious approach. Keep in mind, most of these people are scientists, so they talk like scientists. And everything that they said comes from a scientific perspective. And after 4 hours of that, it's definitely what we got. This guy, Dan Evans, who works for NASA, claims that NASA is going to be fully transparent with the public. Dr. Kirkpatrick's testimony, he said that we have observed objects in the air that we do not understand. These objects behave with characteristics that are difficult to explain, and we have not been able to identify what these objects are. Kirkpatrick explained that many of the UAPs and UFOs have been identified, from being an aircraft to a bird or a weather balloon, but the percentage of ones they haven't been able to identify are ones that we need to focus on. Mike Free with the FAA was saying that any UAP reports from their pilots are taken seriously and will be handed over to NASA. And with our whistleblower protection program now in place for military service pilots, those individuals who have experienced UAPs or experience UAPs will be able to come forward and share their stories as well. And none of the current data surrounding the UAPs that have been documented suggest that they're extraterrestrial. Over 800 UAP reports that they are looking through. Most of them are classified, some of them that are declassified. The ones that are classified will eventually be released to the public, but it's not until they have enough data to give more of an understanding of that footage for the public to know what they're looking at. They actually gave an explanation as to why some of the quality looks poor. And that's because we do have access to technology that can look at a UAP or UFO when it's first reported. Unfortunately, we have privacy laws in this country that prevent us from being able to use those sensors to look at those UFOs, because let's say they're in your backyard, that's where it gets a little dicey. Even offered up the idea, if you're an app developer, consider this, where if we had an app that could interact with our phone's cameras, because our cameras on our phones now have been upgraded so much so that if there was a reading for the sensors being used when they are filming UAPs or UFOs and then sending them in to NASA, they have more data to go along with the recordings. Outside of those main points, it was a lot of science jargon, honestly. Just went over many topics of how they're going to address collecting the data, the sensors, and all of the stuff involved for the scientific method. But we need to be on the lookout for the end of July when they're going to release a more in-depth report, and hopefully we'll see some more of those classified videos.
Hello, I'm Carol Rosin, and I'm in Arizona right now at the 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, where I was a witness in Washington, D.C. in May 2001. At that event, I spoke for Wernher von Braun. I gave his warning to the world that there was going to be a faked alien invasion. He called it the last card that would be played in the entire war game, which has scenarios of formulas for wars, enemies, sanctions, fighting, killing, leapfrogging the technology. Von Braun, the father of rocketry, when I became the first woman executive in that aerospace industry, Von Braun taught me and gave me his deathbed assignment to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space. So I came here to give a reminder about that warning of Wernher von Braun, that the last card is being played right now. You're seeing it in the media. You're seeing faked pictures. You can't tell whether a UFO is a real one or not. They're not even UFOs, they're identified. Dr. Greer is explaining at this event that there are so many that are man-made. It's the old game of having to have the next enemy, so that you have an enemy that you can keep building the war game against, keep that economy going, and dominate and control the entire space around all of us. And I know some of you, if you're aware of it, are noticing that we're being controlled right on this planet in so many different ways. Wernher von Braun wanted to open that up. He worked under Hitler. He actually learned that from experience we can use the technology for the good or for war, and we will never, ever be safe if we escalate the arms race into that place above all of our heads. In the United States where I live, there's a huge momentum to close off even access to space without permission, without the United States and allies dominating and controlling space. So there's an enemy mentality. Well, I could go on with that scenario for a long time and explain it further, but I think most of you listening to this know what I'm talking about. The problem is we don't see a way out of it if we're looking for earthbound solutions, which leads me to then talking about the treaty that was introduced by Russia and China decades ago. It's been called for over and over again. It's been updated in 2008, 2014. It's now ready to be signed into a binding world law, and that's all we need to get done. But how do we get that done? Do we have a peace president? Since we have in the United States been at war for 93% of our time since 1776, when this country was formed. We don't have a peace president. And I'm calling on the leaders of the world right now, as are some of the people who put together over 100 of them who are now committed to not be the first to place weapons in outer space, on now finding a leader who will put them together to sign this treaty, send it to the United Nations Secretary General, who will then announce that we have a binding world law to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space. This treaty exists. It's on my website, peaceinspace.com, that's been put together by experts all over the world. If you look down the news section, you'll see some of these experts, many from Russia and China. And I also have that same information multiplied over with including 700 plus videos of speeches from the Ziegel's readings that have been put together by Professor Alexander Simonov in Russia, hundreds of people coming twice a year to Russia to give their talks about different issue areas that have solutions, but that now are suffering with extreme problems. And I've met so many people in Russia, in the office of the president. Vladimir Ermakov, who speaks English, came to me last time in December 2019 when I was there and whispered in my ear, you know, Carol, we had the same conversation 35 years ago. The only difference is that now I have grandchildren. Well, I haven't had children. I have 400 million orphans, however. I see hundreds of species disappearing every week. I see earth changes that are so dangerous and people are suffering all over the world. And are we prepared? Well, the theme of the war game is prepare for war, prepare to win. I say that the Space Force, the Space Forces have a new role to play. They need to be a force, but a force now to solve these urgent problems. They have the technology in the military, industrial, lab, university, intelligence community, NASA, and other international space and defense agencies and intelligence community to use the technologies and our highest consciousness to solve these problems. But we need to do it fast because the extinction process is well underway and it's in an accelerated motion. So I'm leaving you with the thought that we can have peace on Earth if we can maintain it in outer space, invite our neighbors in, get to know that that is a reality. We are not alone and there is no hostility. There are no neighbors that are hostile or threats from space. We're all together as one family. That's not rhetoric, it's the truth, but it extends into outer space. And now we have a tool, this treaty, that you'll read on peaceinspace.com and support, call on the leaders. I'm calling on President Putin right now to lead the way and become our first planetary peace president. And may peace prevail in space so that we can have peace on Earth. Thank you.
We have others that made anything which would not have to be considered closed. So I don't want you to answer what they've said necessarily.
Allies have seen these. China has established its own version of a UAP task force, so clearly a number of countries have observations of things in the airspace that they can identify.
And do we share data with some, with all? Are they sharing with us?
We share data with some, and some share data with us.
But not necessarily all that have publicly reported something?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that's an important thing, and for the other session, actually, that we don't discuss that now. Because, you know, obviously something like this can be a national security challenge for us, and no doubt about it. If they're developed by an adversary through some breakthrough technology, they can be very disruptive to our military actions, or at least serve as a distraction. So my caution would be careful who we share our data with, and don't necessarily trust some of the data we may get from someone else. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Himes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the objectives of this open hearing is to try to erode some of the stigma that attaches to, in particular, our military men and women reporting this. It's obviously really very serious because should one of our adversaries have developed a technology that we don't know about it, we need to know about it yesterday. And obviously, any sort of stigma that prevents our military from reporting this data as comprehensively as possible is a national security threat. So I really just have two questions in the service of that goal. The first is, the chairman asked that we run that video again. Most people, when they see a video, we're all used to seeing things from a car, seeing things from a sidewalk. Very few people have the experience of observing something.
The first thing I think that's important to note about this is there are lots of things when you are moving very fast and an object is between you and a stationary reference point like the ground, it gives a lot of different impressions about how quickly something is or isn't moving. And it actually means that it is a challenge, especially with narrative-based data, to get a lot of information on that. That's why the sensor data is so important, because things do happen very quickly, as you see there. And sometimes things that happen very quickly, something may be moving very slow. That aircraft is moving quite fast. How fast that object is moving that goes by is probably very slow.
So I guess my point is that an object...
We now know where the giant asteroid that's heading towards Earth might actually hit. For those of you that don't know, there's an asteroid that's on path to hitting planet Earth in the year 2032. It's about 300 feet wide and it can easily destroy a city. And if you don't believe me, just look it up for yourself. So the lucky country that will most likely be hit by this massive asteroid called YR24 is the UK. So there's a few different places in the UK that it will most likely hit, and we have a little chart here to help us understand a little bit better about what the impact damage will be. So if you're in the red zone, then you're pretty much done for. Orange, you're also pretty much done for. Honestly, if you're in the green even, you're done for. Let's get it real. The only place that you're not even still safe is going to be the yellow area, where you're still probably going to get glass in your eye. Here's a list of the cities that could be hit in the UK. We got Nottingham, Birmingham, Manchester, Cardiff. I've actually never even heard of that. Maybe it should hit that one. Edinburgh. Oh, and London, bro. Well, now you know. If you're living in any of these cities now, you have a few years to get the hell out of there. Let me know what you guys think about this.
So this is a real nerve center for the U.S. government.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
like
it's
one
a
of the
think tank.
one of the big ones.
It
in the
is.
country.
Yes.
Okay, so does a V2 look like this?
It's much smaller.
And so your grandfather, who worked on the V2,
yes,
you were telling me that it stood for something. In German, what did it mean?
The V stood for Vergeltungswaffen, which means revenge weapon.
And the Germans were firing the V2 at the end of the war, right? Into the UK?
Into the UK.
Into Belgium?
Into Belgium, en masse, yes. Into the UK. And as he told me that the largest challenge they had with that missile was guidance systems.
Okay.
Because they didn't have, there were no satellites and no GPSs. They used gyroscopes. So they had to be situated properly on the terrain, aimed properly, and then the gyros had to be calibrated properly, and then they launched them, and they went off on their own. And they were basically an area weapon, not a precision strike weapon.
Okay, but it was technology the West didn't have and the Soviets didn't have.
That is correct.
It was far ahead of everything else.
They were using, I understand the Russians had multiple launch rocket systems that were on portable tracked vehicles that would launch in the battlefield.
Okay.
You know, limited range, but they were, you know, these V2s had the capability to go, you know, over to the English mainland and into that area too. And so the goal was always to develop a delivery platform for some payload to go further and with more accuracy, which they were actually working on when the war ended. They were developing a multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile.
Why were the Germans so far ahead?
Well, I just think that they have a unique, intricate interest, and their minds seem to be tuned to work towards, you know, a high technology solution to a hobby, because rocketry was a hobby back in those days, even in the United States.
A hobby?
Yes.
What, like your little model rockets?
Yes.
As kids?
Yes, they were here too, but not to the degree of perfection that the Germans were working on.
Mm. Theo, you're very strict about the camera out here, so keep it down, down, down until we go to these tourist sites.
Yeah. Imagine you're a tourist in a tourist bus. They'll tell you you can go, come and take pictures when we get out of the bus. They don't want you filming the buildings.
Nothing over there.
And the building numbers. You see, that identifies a location. I mean, for obvious reasons.
Right.
Rocket Park. These were rockets that were developed here. Now, the one on the left looks like a V2, but it's not. I think
that smaller one there?
Yeah, that's the Hermes missile.
So this is a new world for me. Where am I wrong here? Where am I right? The NASA was mostly German engineers in the beginning?
Well,
what percentage?
Commissioners, today I'd like to bring to your attention a potential fraud on an enormous scale happening in your county. There's now clear evidence of NASA using numerous methods to grossly mislead the public about astronauts being on the International Space Station. During interior ISS scenes from NASA's own live feed, the use of wires, harnesses, green screens, and virtual reality have been detected to achieve the appearance of a weightless environment. Examples of this include astronauts fading in and out of the screen, green screen glitches, grabbing objects that aren't really there, pulling on invisible wires, getting tangled in their harnesses, and even astronauts appearing out of thin air. This begs the obvious question. If they're really up there, why are they using Hollywood techniques to fake the footage? Now, unfortunately, I can't show you these clips in here today, but I will be sending them to you. Outside the International Space Station, during spacewalks, air bubbles have been recorded on numerous occasions. How is it possible for air bubbles to be present in the vacuum of space? I once questioned astronaut Scott Kelly about this phenomenon. His body language and answers only created more questions. In 2013, astronaut Luca Parmitano nearly drowned during a spacewalk when his helmet filled with water. This happened again just last year. Air bubbles, helmets filling with water, and drowning. Are they in space or are they underwater? Now, what's really interesting is that they train for spacewalks in an underwater pool with a complete ISS replica. Now, surely they aren't filming these spacewalks in an underwater pool and then editing them to appear if they're in space, because that sure would be something, wouldn't it? I'm calling on the Brevard County Commissioners to open a full investigation into NASA's fraudulent practices and use of taxpayer dollars. It costs NASA $3 billion per year to operate the ISS, and if they don't have a darn good explanation as to why they're faking these videos, I and the public would like a darn good explanation as to where our tax money is going. And if they are indeed faking the funk, it is our duty to expose and eliminate this fraudulent and astronomically wasteful ISS program. And look, I know what you're all thinking. The NASA is part of the federal government, and you're just county commissioners. Even if what I'm saying is true, what can you do? But let me remind you, not only is this happening in your county, as public officials, you have the platform and the ability to make a statement or hold a press conference, alerting the public, state, and federal authorities to investigate further. You have the power to start the conversation. Video evidence of everything I described today will be emailed to you all, and I truly hope we can get to the bottom of this. I look forward to the day that $3 billion annual budget is put towards our veterans, our homeless, maybe some of that mental health stuff the young lady just spoke about, and the revitalization of Brevard County.
Poem said, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon, and her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon. You know the man just upped my rent last night? Because Whitey's on the moon. No hot water, no toilets, and no lights, but Whitey's on the moon. I wonder why he's upping me. Because Whitey's on the moon? I was already giving him 50 a week, and now Whitey's on the moon. Taxes taking my whole damn check. The junkies make me a nervous wreck. The price of food is going up. And as if all that crap wasn't enough, a rat done bit my sister Nell. With Whitey on the moon, her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. Was all that money I made last year for Whitey on the moon? How come I ain't got no money here?